Relief on the way.
It's record $18 billion for a property tax relief.
Texas voters overwhelmingly approve a statewide ballot proposition to give homeowners a break on their property taxes. A look at what passed and what did not on Election Day. Special session number 4 underway. Governor Greg Abbott tries again to convince rural Republican lawmakers in the House to pass his school choice or private school voucher bill. Panic over the polls. Some Democrats expressed concerns over a poll showing President Biden would lose to former President Trump in a number of battleground states.
So polls that are done this early, and you can point to history, showing that people are not yet focused on the 2024 election.
I'm Jack Fink. Get your fix for Texas politics. Eye on Politics starts right now. Hello and welcome. Property tax relief is on the way for more than 5.7 million Texas homeowners. Voters overwhelmingly approved Prop 4 on the statewide ballot that will increase the homestead exemption on school property taxes for most homeowners from $40,000 to $100,000. On election night, one of the state senators who pushed for this, Republican Paul Betancourt of Houston, told me this is permanent relief now in the Texas Constitution.
We're going to continue to cut the tax rate as values go up. So this is going to be very long lasting. It's record $18 billion for a property tax relief, and there hasn't been that big of a number anywhere in the United States that we can find.
And taking a look at some of the other ballot propositions that passed, Prop 9, which gives retired Texas teachers their first cost of living adjustment in nearly 20 years. Prop 6, which creates the Texas Water Fund to pay for water projects across the state and fix aging infrastructure. Prop 7, establishing the Texas Energy Fund to provide low-interest loans for companies that build natural gas-fired power plants, all in an effort to develop more energy when residents and businesses really need it during extreme heat or a winter storm. The only statewide proposition that failed is Prop 13, which would have raised the mandatory retirement age for state judges and justices from 75 to 79. School board measures were also on many of your ballots. In the fast-growing Prosper ISD, the line of voters extended outside into the parking lot to wait their turn to cast their ballot on the most expensive bond in North Texas. It was worth $2.8 billion. Much of it came in Prop A, $2.4 billion, to build schools and renovate and expand existing campuses. Voters also gave their thumbs up to Prop B, $140 million for new technology for students and teachers, and Prop D, $125 million for a new performing arts facility. But when it came to Prop C, $102 million in all, including $95 million for a new district-wide football stadium, voters balked and they sacked it. And at one point, the vote came so close, there was only a 1-vote difference. We spoke with voters on both sides of this issue.
We need to go back to the drawing board and do some due diligence and look at how we spend our money on the schools. We need more schools, but I think we need to do more due diligence on reducing the cost of the schools.
I think it's a great idea. We've lived here for over 15 years, and so we've been here to see the growth of the community and the student population and the parents, and it's very much needed in regards to keeping up with the influx of people.
We found similar trends at other North Texas school districts that held bond elections. In the Louisville and Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISDs, voters approved propositions for classrooms and technology, but said no thanks when it came to athletic facilities. The special election in House District 2 ended in a runoff Tuesday night. You may remember this seat was previously held by Brian Slayton, who was expelled earlier this year. None of the 6 original candidates reached more than 50% plus 1 of the vote, so now a runoff will take place between Republicans Brent Money and Jill Dutton. A date has not been set for this runoff just yet. And voters in the state's largest city, Houston, are in the process of selecting a new mayor. This race also ended in a runoff. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Texas Senator John Whitmire, both Democrats, will face off on December 9th. Now to the Texas Capitol, where lawmakers are keeping the lights on just a little bit longer in the House and Senate chambers. Governor Greg Abbott made it official this week and called a fourth special session, as we had reported he would for the past couple of weeks. On his agenda, his school choice or private school voucher plan, calling for the use of taxpayer money to subsidize private school for some students. The governor also wants to boost funding for public schools and for teacher pay raises. And Abbott placed border security back on the agenda as well.
I'm optimistic that we can get something done that both chambers can agree to and that we can get on the governor's desk very quickly.
Republican State Representative David Spiller told me he and the Senate updated House Bill 4 to address a concern by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Under this version, when a migrant is detained after crossing illegally into Texas, they would be fingerprinted, photographed, and had their backgrounds checked against the terror watch list.
We don't want terrorists to get away. We thought that we had sufficiently provided for that in the previous bill, but we have strengthened that.
We still have a crisis at our southern border.
On Thursday, Spiller introduced his bill to the House State Affairs Committee. Spiller said that under the measure, it's a Class B misdemeanor when a migrant crosses into Texas illegally instead of going to a legal port of entry to request asylum. If detained by a state law enforcement officer, the person would be brought to a state or county judge, be given a lawyer, and under certain circumstances would be able to voluntarily return to their country and be escorted by authorities to the border, or would be prosecuted and after their sentence be ordered to return to their country. During the House hearing, opponents criticized the measure.
Our people do not want increased policing and incarceration. My God of love and peace does not want increased policing, incarceration, and discrimination.
Representative Spiller said he expects opponents will challenge the state law, citing historical precedent that immigration is a federal issue.
I believe that what we've done here under House Bill 4 is completely constitutional. It is not in conflict with federal law. As a matter of fact, it is right in line with the much of federal law that has been in place for decades.
The fourth special session began right after the third special session ended, and lawmakers passed a bill to ban private companies from requiring their employees to get a COVID-19 vaccine. Republican State Representative Brian Harrison has pushed this for months.
I'm very proud and honored to have led the charge in the state of Texas as the loudest voice in the state against COVID tyranny. Quite frankly, we should have banned COVID mandates a very long time ago. In fact, I filed the Texas COVID Vaccine Freedom Act 4 hours after I was sworn into the legislature almost exactly 2 years ago today. And now the thing that I care the most about is making sure that every Texan benefits from it. And it is unfortunate that Speaker Phelan and the Democrat parliamentarian chose to warp the House rules to not let the bill protect one of the groups who's most harmed by the mandates, and that's our students. Private universities are not banned from having mandates, neither are nursing schools or medical schools. And I'm sorry, our future doctors and future nurses, they deserve medical freedom too.
Abbott is going to sign the bill at the governor's mansion on Friday. A border security bill did pass during the third special session as well. It will crack down on illegal stash houses and human smuggling, and the governor will sign this legislation too. Up next, we take a closer look at border security legislation. We'll go one-on-one with State Representative David Spiller of Jacksboro. Then later, panic over the polls showing President Biden trailing former President Trump in the battleground states. We'll go one-on-one with Regina Montoya, who's part of the effort to re-elect Biden. Eye on Politics on CBS News Texas. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Border security is back on the agenda for the fourth special session. House and Senate lawmakers have introduced identical bills to spend $1.5 billion on a state border wall. Governor Abbott has posted video of border wall construction on the platform X. In addition, there's now another attempt to make it a state crime for a migrant to enter Texas illegally. We spoke with Republican State Representative David Spiller of Jacksboro about his bill.
We've been working with the governor's office for some time, and then certainly we wanted it to pass. It passed the Texas House. It was the most conservative and strongest border security measure in the history of our state and our nation that passed the House the last time. We couldn't get it across the finish line across the way, but we felt like it's important to work with everyone. And so we worked with the Senate. We worked with all interested parties, stakeholders, to try to come up with the thing. We've tried to tweak it some and make it even stronger than it was, and we feel that we've addressed some of the issues and concerns that were raised the last time, and so we're constantly trying to improve the bill.
And one of the criticisms that was brought up by Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick was that the bill did not require anyone detained to be fingerprinted, photographed, and background checked. The Lieutenant Governor said the Senate would not allow terrorists and dangerous criminals to get away. So has this been addressed in this new legislation?
Yes, and we want the same result here. And so in the House, we don't want terrorists to get away. We thought that we had sufficiently provided for that in the previous bill, but we have strengthened that and included additional language in both these identical versions to address those issues and concerns. And so I feel good about where we are there and look forward to having all those safeguards in place. And that was one of the areas that we looked at. The other area primarily was the concern about law enforcement officers making determinations and independently taking someone to a port of entry. And so we've added the language. It's somewhat more costly, admittedly, but there are safeguards, and we have due process more so than we did before to say that those folks are taking to an independent magistrate, and determinations are made at that point after the magistrate gets involved and people are read their rights and they have the opportunity to counsel, they have the opportunity, all those things that we would normally have as citizens under our law anyway with every single case.
So given that, can you walk me through what might happen? Give me a likely scenario, if you will, on if a migrant enters the state outside of a port of entry illegally. And so a law enforcement officer happens to come upon this person. So walk me through the process under this legislation.
Well, and again, same as before, it's still the punishment for illegal entry as a Class B misdemeanor. The limitation period for that is 2 years. It's again, I want to make clear this is not a round everybody up that might be here illegally and prosecute them. That is not what this law is about. It wasn't before, it isn't now. So generally, the officer would have to have probable cause to believe that this offense had been committed and committed within that time frame. They would arrest that person, take that person either to a magistrate, or you could do it as we do with other cases now through teleconference remotely and so forth. They're read their rights. They're explained if they don't have if they need a translator, get a translator. All those safeguards will be put in place, and at that point, the individual if the magistrate determined that they were here illegally and they met the requirements under the statute, then they would be given the opportunity to dismiss that case and voluntarily return. And of course, the identifying information, fingerprinting, other biometric data would be obtained, put in a database, would make sure that we don't have suspected terrorists and things like that. Those folks would be taken to a port of entry and would be ordered to return. Alternatively, if they choose not to voluntarily agree to return, then they could and would be probably prosecuted under that offense. And if convicted at the end of that sentence, whatever that may be, then they would be ordered to return.
There are going to be legal questions about this because historically, the Supreme Court has said this is a federal issue. And when you're talking about immigration, this needs to be handled in the federal courts. So how do you prepare to defend that if this is challenged, which I suspect if this passes, it would be?
Well, I suspect the challenge, and some people have said, well, are you trying to overturn the Arizona case? My answer is no. I've read the Arizona case. I understand, I think, the Arizona case. I believe that what we've done here under House Bill 4 is completely constitutional. I believe that it's not in conflict with the Arizona case. What Arizona tried to do is completely different under their law than what we have here. It is not preempted by federal law. It is not in conflict with federal law. As a matter of fact, it is right in line with the much of federal law that has been in place for decades. And Texas has the constitutional right, authority, and ability to secure its own borders.
Democrats and other critics have said this is nothing more than a show me your papers bill, which you have denied before in our previous conversations. But as far as like a scenario where this is happening, you believe this is really mostly going to happen along the border. In other words, it's not going to happen up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area or north in Jacksboro, right? I mean, this is really for state officials who are along the border who come across a migrant. Is that right?
But it is a statewide law. I'm not saying that you couldn't have prosecution in those counties, but I would say the vast majority of it would be within 50 miles of the border. But also to address some of those concerns, we have exempted under this version of House Bill 4 and said that you could not have any enforcement. No one can be arrested or detained either at a public or private primary or secondary school, a church, synagogue, or place of worship, a healthcare facility, which includes hospitals where anyone would be receiving medical treatment, a safe, a safe ready facility dealing with victims of rape, people that anything dealing with cartel or anything like that. We've tried to put safeguards in here to make sure that people are safe and to show that this is not just a round everybody up that's here illegally and ship them off. That is not at all what House Bill 4 is about.
Coming up, some Democrats expressed concerns about a poll showing President Biden trailing former President Trump in battleground states. We go one-on-one with Regina Montoya of Dallas, who's part of the Biden-Harris re-election team. We'll be back in a moment.
The separation of powers is one way our government stays balanced. To understand it a little better, let's compare it to a football game. 3 different groups keep the game running smoothly. First, the coaches. In government, the coaches are like the legislative branch. They develop the playbook and strategies for players to follow. Second, there are the referees who decide if what happened on the field is right or wrong. This is kind of like the judicial branch. And finally, third are the owners and front office. They make big decisions that affect players. And in this scenario, those players are everyday citizens like you and me. To recap, the refs keep things fair, the coaches shape the game, and the bigwigs at the top set the stage for us, the players, to navigate the field. Each branch works separately, but their actions affect us all. Now, imagine there was no separation of powers. Coaches acting like refs, GMs calling plays, and the refs firing players. The game would be chaotic. And that's why in the game and in government, everyone has a role.